Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe Digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. On We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again.
The movement involved some great and courageous people. Aaron Henry, Fannie Lou Hamer, so many people who every day took their lives in their hands to make Mississippi a better place. But they had to have lawyers likewise.
The changing of a society is a process that's glacial, whether we like it or not. Changing people's minds is an enormous undertaking.
Mississippi. It was the worst of the closed society.
There were so many things going on in Mississippi that were bad. If you could have seen the way black people were treated, it was just horrendous.
Our society is one based on the rule of law. That's how it's done in America. Lawyers were a helping role and a necessary role.
The primary responsibility of the national government was to protect fundamental rights, the rights of freedom and equality of the black people. And the national government wasn't moving.
Lawyers put real lives on the line.
I remember he was handling one case. He had received a telephone call saying, if you show up for court, we will kill you.
We must come to grips with the fact that while we are engaged in a battle to get an ultimate goal, it will take generations to do it.
We Believe wants to hear from you. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800.
Good evening, and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. You know, we broadcast each week from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. You saw the prelude to the show that just was on, and it talked about the history of Mississippi. And it talked about all of the atrocities and the things that were going on back in that time. And we had some giants, some people who gave their full commitment, lost their life in the process. We celebrate and salute all of the African Americans leaders that made the ultimate sacrifice. And with me, my heart always goes out to Vernon Damer and his family, to Medgar Evers and his family, to James Meredith and his family, to Charles Evers and his family, to W.E. Garrett and his family. And there are so many more that fought and gave everything that they had in Mississippi. Now, interesting enough, this documentary is presented by Butler Snow, and the foundation for the Mississippi Archives. And Butler Snow is a premier law firm here in Jackson, Mississippi, with offices all across the country. And when I first got to know the law firm and the people there, Governor Haley Barbour was not governor at the time. He was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., but soon to come to Mississippi to run for governor and change the climate of the state of Mississippi like no one had ever done before. You see, in Mississippi, the control of the laws and the legislature was always done by farmers and people that were prior plantation owners. And so the governor didn't have much power. The lieutenant governor, because he appoints all the chairmen of all of the committees, had the real power in Mississippi before the arrival of Haley Barbour. Haley Barbour brought big-time politics to Mississippi. He was listed as a candidate to run for president of Mississippi as well. He changed the climate where the governor then had the power. And he had the votes and the support to do that. I had several meetings with Haley and had interesting dialogues with him along the way. And as always in Mississippi, when you meet someone for the first time, we always ask, well, who are your folk? Where did you come from? It was interesting for me to listen to Haley talk about, his lineage coming all the way from LaFleur. LaFleur was the great general that signed the treaty that moved the Choctaws out to Oklahoma, the Creek of Dancing Rabbit. So he had a history of being a leader. Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, leadership skills are the same, and they require the same commitment and dedication. And so tonight we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about Mississippi. We're going to talk about the national scene as well. And we're going to talk about how we're going to uplift the African American community from the perils of its past. I have with me, as always, my guest, but before I go to him, I want to send a shout out to my oldest daughter out in Atlanta. I want to say happy birthday to you, Toya. I understand that you're catching up with me in age, and I'm very proud of the work that you're doing out there, and especially with your entrepreneurial spirit and your new company that you've launched in terms of new cannabis. So I hope this is a very special day for you. Love you very much. My guests are very, very important and very knowledgeable about what went on, what's going on, and what must go on in the future. So I want to introduce to our viewerships out there Dr. Eldridge Henderson. Doc, how have you been?
I've been fine, sir.
Good. We're going to have another guest that's going to join us tonight, Dr. James Hull, Pastor James Hull, up in the Clarksdale area. But let's talk a little bit about Mississippi. It's in Black History Month.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about Mississippi Black history a little bit and tell us a little bit about how Mississippi and African Americans got to where they are today in Mississippi and beyond.
Well, Mississippi has a strong history, a very strong history of two things: white supremacy and racism. Prior to slavery, during slavery, after slavery, and up to today. There have been very few changes that were mutually done in Mississippi. When I say mutually, things that were agreed on by black and white folks. There's never been any seriousness about integration in Mississippi, in the South, and in the nation. Very little consensual support. Everything was done because of economics. Black folks have always been considered an outcast in Mississippi, an outcast in the states, and I say states now, the United States. And they've always been denied constitutional rights on the state level and the national level and internationally. So there are very few positive changes between the white Mississippians, the European Americans, and Europeans worldwide when it comes to black citizenship, equality, and equity. Very few changes.
Now, African Americans had a rich history. I believe that civilization began in Africa with black people. You know, I don't know where the Garden of Eden is, and I don't know what Adam was, but if he was in Africa,
he had to be black.
He had to be black.
That's right.
That son was going to make sure of that. And so we come from such a rich history, with the beginning of civilization on the Nile. Had such a head start. How in the world would a people with that kind of legacy and that kind of history from that region of the country, where all of the resources are there, all of the diamonds, all of the minerals, all of the copper, all of the natural, wonderful resources of this beautiful world, 65% of them are in Africa. How can a people with that kind of head start find themselves in the position that they're in today?
It was because of one word: humanism. Black people worldwide, and most people worldwide, always believe that human beings are equal. So when the Europeans and others would move into the African region, they would always accept them. They would give them a foothold to have somewhere to live. And I told you before, when they would do this, the Europeans then would concentrate themselves together because they wanted to protect themselves and use the resources of the Africans, the Hispanics and others, anywhere they went, in order to get a foothold, and then they would build a fort. I talked to you about this sometime before. And at that point, they will only allow few of the so-called natives in then. See, once the Europeans got themselves together, they practiced supremacy. And they considered the others in the area as supporters, and they used them until they got the economics they want. And then they called the worst group of people in to regulate those so-called Africans, whoever we might be talking about, and that was the religious segment, the priest, and let them get infiltrated with the so-called native people in that area, whether it's Africa, America, Caribbean area, whatever. And that's why I say religion and white supremacy go hand in hand. And usually you send in the army, the preachers or the priest, and then you create you a police force. Call them what you want. People to keep things in line, and that's where you take over. Starting from the riverbanks, and then you take over the exterior, the interior, and the whole country, or the whole nation, or the whole state, and you do it by deceit, murder, and confusion.
Now, was this a strategy that was used by all Europeans? You know, we had the Dutch that were coming into there.
You don't have to go any further. You use the key word, all. Their rule has always been, we are going to take everything that belongs to others, claim it ourselves, change the history, and say we invented it, we came up with it, and we are superior. Wow. And you are inferior, you are savage. You are totally in disregard.
But in the European society, it's my understanding that African Americans, after they were indentured servants and they became free people in Europe after the indentured service period was over, not like in the U.S., not like in Mississippi, where it was a permanent state that could only be changed by the Civil War.
Right. Well, in Europe, after they got out of that indentured service, a lot of those guys were counts, military generals, all kind of business people, scholars, philosophers, poets, you name it. But as the years passed, and as the Europeans gained a foothold in America, in Africa, in the Caribbean, they took those rights away from the black, what I call Europeans.
Wow, hold your thought there, Doc. We're getting ready to go to a commercial break, but I just want to send a shout out to Reuben Anderson, the gentleman that you saw in the trailer that came on just before the show began. Reuben has been an outstanding judge and a civil rights advocate, him and Fred Banks, over the years. And I see he's still involved in the struggle and trying to do good work. You're looking at We Believe Digital, broadcasting live from right here in Mississippi. We're going to a commercial break. We'll be right back.
Socrates Garrett ENT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into M.Dot grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. By using Socrates Garrett ENT.com's crushed concrete products, anyone from homeowners to general contractors can help reduce landfilled concrete waste, conserve natural resources, and gain significant economic savings on materials and disposal costs. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
Advertise on WeBelieve.global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.global or call 800-492-5186, option 1.
We Believe wants to hear from you. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186. Watch live at WeBelieveDigital.com. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186.
Doc, we're back. You know, we have such an interesting show. We're talking about Mississippi history, and we're talking about the history of African Americans all over the world. And I want all of our viewers and listeners out there to understand and to know that, you know, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, my co-host here tonight, has got a wealth of information and knowledge, written several books, has talked and spoken to groups all over this country. If you're interested in a speaker, if you're interested in someone who has the history, knows the history of Mississippi, is not afraid to tell the history, then he should be your first choice as a lecturer or speaker in your Black History events. You know, you first of all have to have lived it and understand it. And Doc has had the gift of long life, and he's been involved in this struggle from the very beginning. So he's here, and we're going to give out his number later on where you can call him direct and engage him in your various programs. I have joining with me a warrior, a guy that I know has been in the struggle and has been fighting for African Americans and has chosen some paths and some roads that others dare not travel, has been educated in the white schools in Mississippi and has dealt with the Republican Party in Mississippi, has fought for black rights in Mississippi, is pastoring a church in Mississippi, is establishing a training center for young African Americans that want to be in government. And so I want y'all to welcome to our conversation tonight Pastor James Hull up in Clarksdale, Mississippi. How have you been, sir?
Hello, Brother Socrates Garrett. I'm fine. Just one small correction, up in Tupelo, Mississippi.
Tupelo, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
That's a little bit further north than Clarksdale. It's cold
Yes,
up there, then I guess.
It's cold. It was cold today, sir.
Well, you know, it was 70 degrees, 78 degrees in Macomb, and it was 32 degrees in Tupelo and up in the Memphis area. So, you know, I don't know what God's saying, but he's saying something. Tell our listening audience and viewers a little bit about who you are and what it is you're involved in.
Well, you know, first of all, thank you for for having me. It's interesting because when you see a lot of people on CNN and MSNBC, they say, first of all, thank you for having me on. And now I know why. That's the first thing you want to do, is to thank your host for having you on. I'm a product of the West Point Public School system. Entered the University of Mississippi in 1971, got my undergraduate degree in political science. Was on my way to law school, actually had taken and passed the LSATs and decided I want to be a newspaper man, a writer. And so for about 38 years, I was a newspaper reporter, editor, and I was an anchor reporter on television for a number of years. Through all of that, I've been involved in the civil rights movement. I registered my first voter when I was 11 years old in West Point. And the movement has always been the thing that's closest to my heart. I entered the Army when I was 28 years old, and I won a couple of writing awards, journalism awards in the military, got out, worked at Mary Holmes College for a couple of years. And what I'm doing now, Socrates, is really trying to pass along some of the experiences, some of the knowledge, some of the insight that I have garnered over these past several years, and just trying to pass it forward and pass it back, because I think that we as Black folk need to reach back, and we need to lend a hand to our people that we inadvertently and unintentionally left behind. So we've got to reach back to them also. But I'm just grateful that God gave me the gift of communication. That's what I do for a living, and I just want to try to use it as best I can for the betterment and uplift of my people.
Well, Doc, I want you and Dr. Henderson to have some exchange and dialogue, so please jump in, and at any point in time, any questions you might have for Mr. Hull.
Thank you. Pastor Hull, how are you doing this evening?
Dr. Henderson, I'm fine. I'd like to, before you start quizzing me, I would like to just add one thing to your one word. You said the one word was humanism. I call it the African spirit. There are two spirits on this earth. There is the African spirit and there is the Germanic spirit. And I think that we ought to be grateful and recognize the fact that we have African spirit, which opens up our hearts and our minds to everybody. The Germanic spirit is a spirit of raping and pillaging. And that's what the Germanic spirit does. So you're exactly right. In terms of the copper, the diamonds, the gold, there's one other thing that we have to bear in mind, and that is that one word called technology. Because they came in with technology called the gun, and they intimidated folk on the African continent. The Germans did, the folks with the Germanic spirit. And after they intimidated them, then they began to use their own technology to mine our copper, to mine our gold, to mine our diamonds. And we thought that those things, and still do, that they belong to God and to the earth and not to us. So thank you for saying that, Dr. Henderson. Shoot.
Okay, now, sir, I have a lot of respect for you. I don't know too much about you up until tonight. Sock told me some things, but I did hear about you some years ago. But now let's start at the beginning. Now, when you attended the so-called white university in Mississippi, did you get the white education or the black education? Were you forced to sit in the back and not respond, or were you considered a real student and you were able to communicate as you saw fit, or were you curtailed or contained to say certain things, or you were afraid to speak the truth during that period?
Dr. Henderson, let me answer that in a kind of a roundabout way, because on March the 5th at the university, I'm going to receive a thing called the Jeanette Jennings Trailblazer Award for African American students who literally tried to blaze a trail. When I was at Ole Miss, there were less than 200 students. Now there are more than 6,000, I do believe. When I went to the university, I was always asked, why would a young black kid who spent most of his childhood days in 1964 at the Freedom School, registering voters, hanging around civil rights folk. Why would I choose the University of Mississippi to go through? My answer was simple. The University of Mississippi was not black enough. And it had to be blackened. It needed a tan. And I felt like I was the right person because I knew that I was not going to the University of Mississippi shucking and jiving. I did not go to assimilate. I did not go to blend in. I went to take my blackness and expose my blackness to them Delta boys who went to all of those plantation schools down in the Delta. But no, believe it or not, most of us were ignored. We were not shunned. We were ignored. I mean, I can remember being in classes whole years, whole semesters, and not being called on one time. But we really weren't shunned. We really weren't ostracized per se. We were just ignored. We were not demonized, I should say. We were just ignored. And I guess they felt like if they pretended we weren't there, then we weren't there. But, you know, I went to get my education.
Well, let me tell you, Reverend, the strategy was to be ignored so you would disappear. They wanted you to leave after the first semester. But you didn't do it, and a lot of the others didn't do it, and that really hurt their hearts. You and James Merritt and others stuck it out, graduated, and still maintain your manhood. And today you're doing the same. And some of those very people that you were in class with are now big-time politicians, big-time businessmen. You know them. They are still alive. And now they want to pretend they're your friends, and you used to sit in the same class with them. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong so I can apologize in public.
Well, Dr. Henderson, I got a lot of respect, and I will say that openly and unapologetically. I got a lot of respect. Like I said, I didn't go to University of Mississippi. Notice I don't use that OM phrase. I use the UM phrase. And let me call some names. Ronnie Agnew, who was the editor-in-chief of the Clarion Ledger, and who was the executive director of Mississippi Broadcasting. He and I went to Ole Miss together. Otis Sanford, who is the editor-in-chief of the Memphis Commercial Appeal. General Augustus Leon Collins, he came to the University of Mississippi after me. So these were folk that I went to school with, black folks that I went to school with, and none of those folks went shucking and jiving either. We knew why we were there, Dr. Henderson. And as I said, we went to make sure that Ole Miss became blacker, not whiter. I didn't go there to get to be white. I went there so the white folk would understand strong black men.
Thank you.
Pastor, many of the leadership in the black community and the historians in the black community believe that integration hurt us more than anything else during that time. And certainly you going to Ole Miss, you were part of that integrating process in 1964. What do you say? Did integration hurt us? Did it help us in any way? What's your thought?
Well, you know, we were fighting and demonstrating for equality. And unfortunately, Thurgood Marshall convinced us that there was no such thing as separate but equal. And so we bought into this notion of equality meant integration. Dr. James Coleman actually wrote a study about it. He said that young black kids, their self-esteem and their scores went up when they were integrated, as if being in the midst of white people made us smarter or better. But we can always see things in hindsight. And my hindsight tells me that integration was the worst thing to happen to black folk. And if we had been savvy enough to find a way to lobby for and petition for just the resources, if our schools in our books. Dr. Henderson knows something about opening up a school book and having about 15 names written in it because it had passed through the white school for about 5 or 6 years before it even got to the black school. We should have been lobbying and petitioning for and positioning ourselves for the resources and not for integration. Our children lost a lot being taught by white teachers. They lost a lot not being nurtured by black teachers. And so, as far as I'm concerned, and this is what I say in the speeches that I give, I say that integration was really the worst thing to happen to black folk, but it can't end there. We have to understand what I mean when I say that.
Pastor, hold your thought right there. To our viewership all over this world, you can find us on Roku TV, on Facebook, on We Believe Digital, YouTube, and our own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Visit WeBelieveDigital.com. Call us at 800-492-5186. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about the critical race theory and its implications. Stay tuned after this commercial.
S2-E16.com is paving the way forward for a safer city government delivering cutting-edge biosecurity and biosafety protocols developed internationally by top virologists and scientists using an all-natural cleaning solution, killing COVID-19 on contact like no other product on the international market. For more information, please call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at SGECOVIDsolutions.com. Let SGECOVIDsolutions.com provide innovative rapid facilities testing and world-class state-of-the-art biorisk safety protocols for all of your coronavirus needs. Call 1-800-281-9080 or visit us online at SGECOVIDsolutions.com.
Do you have something to say? Do you want your voice heard? Join the We Believe Global lineup. Be the star of your own show. For more info, call 800-492-5186, option number 1, or visit online at WeBelieve.global.
We Believe wants to hear from you. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186. Watch live at WeBelieveDigital.com. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186.
We're back live in the studio, and once again, we're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American-owned broadcast studio, broadcasting out all over the world. All over the world. You can find us on WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform. You can find us on We Believe Global on Facebook, We Believe Digital Podcast on Facebook, We Believe Global on Roku, and you can find us on YouTube. Call us at 800-492-5186. We're having some discussions, and we're going to broaden this base in this discussion. The critical race theory is something that in our Mississippi legislature today, there was a vote, a measure taken to make absolutely certain that CRT was not taught in Mississippi schools and in Mississippi universities. Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
Why is it that white Mississippi and probably whites all over the world don't want critical race theory in schools?
It is very simple. And I have some distant white relatives. And I'm going to tell you, the fact is, from what I've been told, starting in the 1950s and the 60s, most white people are embarrassed to know that their children will learn their history, their real history, in economics, education, politics, and the anti-humaneness they had during that period and today. It would hurt their hearts if their children knew how many people they killed, how many people they discriminated against, how they treated black people and Indians and Chinese and others in Mississippi and the South as anti-humans. If I were white, I wouldn't want to have it in the school either, critical race theory, because it is systematic and institutional in all aspects of our society. And then if you look at some of the demonstrations with the police officers and the regular citizens that were there when they were beating and hanging people and beating the devil out of them, putting dogs on them, some of those people were in the 18 age range and younger. I was part of that group where I wouldn't be out there demonstrating. I didn't believe in that. I got lost my job because of that. But the thing is, a lot of those people are alive today. I'm alive. And if I were doing that kind of thing, I wouldn't want my kids to know that I was such an anti-human advocate during that period. And that's why they don't want to have it in the school. And as long as they have the vote, you're not going to have any critical race theory in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and in most states, unless you go to court, and that'll take another 10 or 15 years for that to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Wow. Pastor Hull, if you don't teach CRT in the schools, is that in fact denying African American history to be taught? Isn't that part of our history?
Short. Yes, it is.
How do you balance that? Yeah.
I hate to cut this short, but I've been plagued with an upset stomach lately. Okay. And I really feel like I'm about to throw up again. I gotta go. I am so sorry. God bless you, but I gotta go. And this is what run to you.
We'll talk with you later. I hope you feel better, Doc. Engineer, I believe we don't have to have the headsets on now. Is that right?
All right, you can take them off.
All right.
See, so that makes you sick.
So I hope you didn't make our good friend upset his stomach up there.
Well, I hope not.
Well, I think he's a pretty strong guy. He's been fighting this fight a long time. But isn't that in fact denying at the teaching of African American history if you deny the CRT in schools?
Well, it is. But the thing is, that's set up to deny the white people to teach it. Most of the teachers are white females in the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. They have very few blacks now that's teaching the mainline students. The few blacks that are teaching in these schools, they are so glad to have their jobs, they're going to follow their curriculum. But that's in the white schools. And you know they're going to have no more than 3 black teachers in the major white schools, and they're going to have the lower level classes. In the black schools, where you have a majority of black students, those teachers want to keep their jobs, so they're going to follow the curriculum. But there are always going to be a few, like Bennett Thompson and others, that's going to teach black history when they teach American history. And that's what I used to do when I taught school. I didn't care nothing about the curriculum, and no matter what subject we taught, if I could find some black contribution in science, history, or whatever, I would throw it in there. And the principals didn't care what you taught, as long as you maintain order in your class, help the student graduate, or pass from class to class. We had social promotion during that time, and that's the way it ought to be today. Teachers don't have to refuse to teach critical race theory, especially black teachers. They ought to teach it in every subject they can find.
Well, let me ask you this. Our churches are our next major institutions after our schools. Are our churches teaching black history?
No.
Should they be teaching?
They ought to be teaching black history along with the public schools. Matter of fact, they ought to have a black history curriculum in the church for pre-K through, I would say, university. Every black church, as a group, ought to have black history courses for kindergarten through university.
Well, how do you reconcile the images of white Jesus in the black congregations and churches? Isn't that some type of oxymoron? Isn't that kind of, you can't have it both ways?
Well, the thing is, now, I hate to say it, but the preachers in the early days were taught by white men to be preachers, and they told them what to preach on or preach at. Now the thing is, most of the black preachers in the early days, couldn't read or write. But they had sharp memories. I had one like that when I was a young man. They couldn't read, but they had sharp memories. They could talk about what they were told. And during the early days, during the slavery period, the white landowners would select their slave preachers and tell them what to say. and watched them as they prepared, and when they got to the point where they were good black preachers, where they would tell the people to take all the hell they can take and love your master and respect him, and you'll go to heaven when they die. When they got to that point, the master will let them go from plantation to plantation because they had them wrapped up.
They had them wrapped up.
And y'all start believing that mess.
Well, you gotta know that religion plays an important part in everybody's life. I don't care what you believe, but that religion, that base, in my opinion, is the floor for morality, for decent living, for us to be civilized.
Exactly, and that's why they taught it like that. See, when you are brainwashed to believe anything, good or bad, that's what you're going to practice. You only can live and teach what you know, what's in your culture, what's been brainwashed in your mind from birth to death. And that's what the Europeans know.
So you're saying I only know what I've been told.
Until you get enough interest to start reading and have a comprehensive knowledge of various religions, ideas, and cultures, and then your mind will change. But when you're taught one thing, in the church, in the school, in your house, your mom, dad, aunts, and everybody teaching the same thing, you will believe whatever it is, and that's why a lot of black folks today still love integration. Because they've been told the white supremacists, the racists, the anti-blacks, are more superior, more knowledgeable than they are.
Well, let me ask you a question, because now we are in a period that we are the majority in most of our urban cities. Black folk, Jackson, Mississippi, for example, is 85% black. And yet we don't seem to progress. We have the largest number of elected officials of any other state in the House of Representatives and in the Senate in the state of Mississippi. And yet we don't progress. I don't know what it's going to take for us, if it's not going to be religion, to move us out of our condition that we're in, because we're in a bad spot. What is it going to take to move our race forward, to move us out of this condition that we're in, whether we've been brainwashed or whether it's self-imposed at this point? What is it going to take to make African Americans live up to their potential?
Sir, it's very simple. I've been telling you and others for years. You have to do several things. You have to recruit your own people at an early age. You recruit them, you train them, then you select them and put them in various positions of responsibility, starting in kindergarten. And you teach them the things you want them to know. And then you gradually start replacing those old politicians, old preachers, old black businessmen and others that'll go along with the status quo with this integration concept. And they will then start talking about what's good for all the people and not be afraid to do what they need to do when it comes to politics, economic development. They'll learn leadership skills. And you're not going to get it in the school system. This is going to have to be done in the churches, but you can't do it under the present administrators that's in the churches. Any preacher that's over 50 years of age not going to make a significant change in his church. Any bishop that's over 50 years of age not going to make a significant change. So it's going to have to be the younger person.
Well, I'm not impressed with young leadership because they've been in the integrated schools. If they don't seem to identify with the struggle, they don't feel the same way that you and I feel about the black man's condition and the black man's need to be elevated. They don't seem to espouse to that concept. And they are younger ones. So if the younger ones are not doing it and the old ones are bought and paid for and indoctrinated, then you paint a hopeless picture.
Well, it's very difficult, but see, most of these young politicians have a strong desire to get to the next level. If a county supervisor or a city council person, they want to move up to the next level. And they know that if they act and say certain things, they will gain the attention of the people that have the money. Now, I'm just going to give it to you factually. And those guys and girls that will start straying away from good leadership going to be identified by the white supremacists, the special interest groups, and they're going to say, that's that Negro right there that we're going to support. And they're going to call him up or send one of their black representatives to talk to him and say, you are the chosen one. You can be mayor. You can be in the House of Representatives. You can be in Congress one day, boy. But you got to do like I tell you. I'll contribute to your campaign. And those boys and girls start losing their minds.
Losing their minds.
They do anything to get ahead. And they don't care whether it's right or wrong. I'm not talking about all of them now. Don't get me wrong. I'm only talking about 99%.
Enough, 99%. Okay,
I'm not racist. I don't believe all nothing.
No.
But 99% up.
Well, listen, viewing audience, we're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American-owned studio. We need your support. This kind of information is critically important to get out to in the country, in the world. This is good information to get out to white folk. You know, the NAACP was founded with the help of white folk. When Obama got elected to be president with the help of white folk. We can't do this as long as African Americans. We didn't create this condition for ourselves. We can't change these conditions without the help of some good white folk. We're getting ready to break for a commercial, and then we'll be back for the final segment of our show. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
New Cannabis Premium Dispensary is providing community health and wellness through CBD and Delta-8. Both CBD and Delta-8 provide an array of health benefits, aiding in appetite, sleep, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and more. New Cannabis Premium Dispensary provides a variety of CBD and Delta-8 products, including gummies, candies, pre-rolls, pain creams, isolate drops, cartridge pens, and so much more. To learn more about New Cannabis products or to place an order, please call or text 415-465-9292 or visit us online at newcannabis.com and follow us on Instagram at newcannabisjackson.
Advertise on WeBelieve.global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.global or call 800-492-5186, option 1.
We Believe wants to hear from you. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186. Watch live at WeBelieveDigital.com. To be on tonight's show, please call 1-800-492-5186.
Well, we're back for our final segment of our show tonight. It's been great conversation so far that we've been having with Pastor James Hull and Eldridge Henderson. You know, these gentlemen have lived Mississippi history. They know it inside and out. And once again, I just want to say how much we appreciate the sacrifices that were made by our leaders. We mentioned Charles Evers, and we mentioned Mega, and we mentioned Martin, and we mentioned Vernon Damer, and a lot of more people that gave their lives and their economy. Their homes were burned down, their business was stolen and taken, their families were separated. And so, you know, it's been a tremendous amount of sacrifice to get us to this point. And I'm afraid that we're beginning to lose ground. We're moving backwards instead of forward as African Americans throughout this country. And unless we come together as a race of people and talk about why that is, then there's no hope for us. You know, in Mississippi, it's particularly important. We are the poorest state in the nation, and when you're this poor, then you're naturally going to be ranked in the top 5 of the most corrupt stations in the nation. It doesn't seem like those two things can go together, but the poorer you are, the more crime that you have. So we're ranked real high in terms of being the most corrupt state in the nation. And we got a lot of crazy things going on in our community, and people fighting to try to stay off of the bottom, to find a way to raise their family and their standard of living up the best way that they can. Dr. Henderson, you came up through this, and I believe that you went to Jackson State University, and I understand that you got fired over there. You want to explain to me how that happened?
You want to get this call first?
Yes. Let's go. Caller, you're on the air. Caller, can you hear me? Caller, chime in when you can. If you can make the connection, we'll just interrupt us. Doc, you were telling us about, I was asking you about your stay at Jackson State University and what happened over there.
Well, it was back in the early 1860s when I was a student. I told you, I was born on a plantation, and I only had a good GPA at the time of about a C-, and I never had any major responsibility. So when I got to Jackson State in the early 60s, they had something called the Student NAACP.
Hold your thought there, Doc. Caller, are you there now?
Mr. Garrett.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Dr. Henderson is 150% tonight. And you made a comment a few minutes ago that you was concerned about the young people and their ability to lead and move us forward. Dr. Henderson, you know Apostle Coward, C.A. Coward.
I know him well. Yes, sir.
All right. When you described a few minutes ago the things that need to be done, do you believe he's in that vein that you're talking about?
That's why he's a prophet. He is in that vein. And if more preachers...
Okay, hold on, though. That's all I need to get.
Okay.
All right, this gentleman has purchased a campus here in Jackson, Mr. Garrett, and I would like for you to meet him next time he's in town. But he has 220 churches across the world, and his oldest pastor... I could be wrong, but none of the young men that pastor in his churches is 40 years old. Doc, you familiar with the Utah, Alabama project, right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
All right, Mr. Garrett, this is a church. The pastor is about 80-some-odd years old now, and they own 4,000 acres of land. They built their own school. You got a group that contacted me a few months ago that's south of Jackson, and I'm not going to get that location. They just purchased 100 acres of land. So what is necessary, and Doc talk about the integration, and my family was a part of that, is that black people got to go back to preserving themselves and their culture. And you're not going to have a whole lot of folks that's going to run in to do this, but it's going to be necessary. And you do have people that's doing it. And what Doc is talking about in the vein of the religion tonight is absolutely what's taking place. So I thank God again for the two of you all for sounding the alarm. We just need to begin to organize and then teach our people. Let me say this and I'm going to close. When the battle is going on about critical race theory, when I look at that, I look at it as a waste of time, in my opinion, because we should be teaching, and you do have schools. Like I said, Apostle Coward, this church have its own school. You have Pastor Harden that have his own schools. So why are we fighting with white folks to teach our children what we need to be teaching them? And if we can't do it in the public school, let's do it in the homes. Look, thank you all so much. I appreciate you, men. Y'all give me encouragement to continue to stay on the wall. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cole.
Doc, tell me a little bit about what happened to you at Jackson State. Now I'm curious.
Well, it's very, very comical at this time. I told you, I left that plantation and finally got to Jackson State. They accepted me because I wasn't able to fall dead. You know, back in those days, if you had a high school diploma, you can get into college somewhere, in a black college, because they needed everybody they could get. So I got up there, and I never had a leadership position. and they had something called a student NAACP club. And I wanted to be president, but I wasn't from a big, rich family. My mother and father were not school teachers. But the bad part is, since I couldn't be president, somebody nominated me to be vice president. I didn't want to be vice president, but I took the job because it was the first, most important job I ever had in my life, and I got no pay for it. A gentleman named Mary Evers was right across the street in the Masonic Temple, and somebody sent the word down that Martin Luther King was sending some groups to Jackson State and the area in the Masonic Temple to teach black kids and others that were interested in marching and demonstrating how to take beatings from white folks, the police chief and others, and let the dogs bite them and be abused, let horses run over them. And being vice president, I told them, no, I don't believe in that now. I believe in self-defense. You don't just let somebody come and kill you, and you know they're going to do it. And they fired me. I told you I wasn't getting paid, but they fired me. I lost my first important job. And when I left, a few years later, I still wasn't able to vote because black folks were running around there trying to integrate, and white folks would say, you Negroes might integrate, but a lot of you are going to die, and I'm going to whip you so bad, and beat you so bad, and burn you so bad until it'll take 30 years for it to happen. And you still have not masterfully integrated any institution in the United States of America. I mean black folks. They are still number 5 in the pecking order. They are still an outcast. They are still an underclass in America. And I'm not talking about most of them, all of them. Now, there are a few talented tenths that you like to talk about that white folks have put in positions of responsibility, but they don't have any decision-making responsibility. They don't.
Well, what about the ones that we've elected to office after Martin Luther King gave his life? We got mayors, and we got boards of supervisors, we got school superintendents. They don't have any ability to make decisions?
Well, they had a little bit of ability as long as they didn't impact the economics of white folks. But when those black mayors, except in a few instances, got to the point where they started looking out for the interests of their citizens, they either were promoted to a federal job or they were kicked out of office and replaced by an Arkansas politician. Just that simple.
Just that simple.
Or they were assassinated while they were mayor.
So either way you look at it, our leadership, if it's effective leadership, is under attack. Until we get the kind of complacent leadership that does absolutely nothing but maintain the status quo in our various communities.
That's why you have to train your own, sir.
We got to train
male and female. Got to train them, starting in the church, starting in community organizations. They have to have these training and leadership programs and teach them civics, leadership, and responsibility, and make sure they learn negotiation and problem-solving skills along the process.
We in Jackson, Mississippi, we in the state of Mississippi are still living in the shadows of oppressed segregation and the way it was years ago. And that's why we have 8 universities in the state of Mississippi, and we have fewer students in all 8 than they have at UCLA. We have universities sitting on top of each other. We got Delta State and Mississippi Valley State sitting right next door. We got the MUW and Mississippi State sitting right next door. You got all of these schools here that were put there because of white folk wanted black children to come back and pick cotton in the fields and didn't want them far from home. They didn't care at all about their education. And so we created all of that, and now we got 8 presidents, we got 8 universities, and a poor state in the nation. We got a 5-member board of supervisors in 82 counties. Some counties don't have enough money to pay their lights. We're going to get back on top of this situation next week. I want y'all to stay tuned to Socrates Garrett Live, and we'll be back next week. Good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American owned broadcasting studio. We believe Digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again.
Do you have something to say? Do you want your voice heard? Join the We Believe Global lineup. Be the star of your own show. For more info, call 800-492-5186, option number 1, or visit online at webelieve.global.